hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed not by acts of parliament, not by acts of kings and queens and princes of earth, not by the Emancipation Proclamation, not by the Civil Rights Act, but by God with certain unalienable rights. And among them are the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is these common values and ideals that unite us today. It was these ideals that broke 168 years of Marine Corps segregation on August 26, 1942. It was these ideals that brought 20,000 African-American men through the gates of Montford Point Camp. They came from all walks of life. They came to prove that patriotism is indeed colorless.
The Montford Point Marines were a project. They were allowed into the Marine Corps to prove that they could not be Marines.
My brother George, we came home after boot camp and told me all about it. I said, well, I'm going to follow in his footsteps, so that's what I did. I forged my mother's signature and signed up right out of high school. 17 and a half.
They were the best and the brightest and the toughest. And I said, that's me.
For a long time, the guys who served tried to tell everybody our story, but nobody was listening.
I'm trying to blank all that stuff out because it wasn't pretty.
The Marine Corps didn't want you to know. It's just that simple.
But this is not just Marine Corps history or black history, it's American history, and the world needs to know about the Montford Point Marines.
(1940), a new decade in America and a new life for its economy. World War II was raging overseas, and the U.S. military was preparing to join the fight. That meant millions of defense jobs for workers, only not for Black Americans. Racism took them out of the manufacturing boom needed to support the military's entry into the global war. Black men were able to register for the draft, but most were only allowed to serve in support roles, and they were all segregated into black regiments in the Army and the Navy. The men were not allowed into the Marine Corps.
Now you got to talk about the leadership of the Marine Corps at the time. Specifically, you got to talk about Thomas Holcomb. He was asked publicly if it was a choice of 250,000 blacks or 5,000 whites. His response was, I'd rather take the whites. He said the Marine Corps, these African American, he called us Negroes then, are trying to break into a club that does not want them.
The painful paradox of Black Americans toiling for a country that treated them like second-class citizens moved civil rights leaders to action. In 1941, A. Philip Randolph, who had famously organized the first Black labor union, went to President Franklin D. Roosevelt's Oval Office with a threat: end segregation in defense industries, or there would be a march on Washington.
At the time, President Roosevelt was running for re-election. A. Philip Randolph was leading the push for fair employment for blacks as the World War II was going on. And to appease them, they said, okay, let's send them in, train them, and once they realize that they can't be Marines, they will go away.
That led the president to sign Executive Order 8802, banning discrimination in defense-related jobs. And with that, the Marine Corps was forced to open its doors to Black men. It did so reluctantly.
They had to figure out, what do you train these new Marines? Surely you cannot send them to Marine Corps Recruit Depot San Diego with the whites, or their beloved Marine Corps Recruit Depot Paris Island in South Carolina. So what they did is they carved out a piece of property in New River, North Carolina, and there was an old camp, old CCC, a civilian conservation camp from World War I, that was available. It was a dilapidated camp. It just had a couple of structures there that were in terrible condition, but it was covered by woods, and it was swampland, and it wasn't a favorable place to have a base. But they figured it would be ideal for the blacks.
Camp Montford Point was built by hand by the first Marines who touched its swampy soil on a 1,600-acre tract of Camp Lejeune.
We came to Montford Point. Well, we had to finish constructing the camp. this area for the training areas because it wasn't completed, not for the, you know, for the habitation of Marines coming in. You had to do all kind of construction and cleaning and cutting, you know, the woods out and everything else.
So instead of these new recruits arriving at a camp thinking I got barracks, I got training, they literally had to build a camp. They had to literally cut down trees, build a fresh water supply, build their barracks, which was just temporary huts at the time that you could put together with a staple gun, with no heat, no running water, and it was tough. And after they had to do all of that, now they got to go to boot camp.
So when we stopped at the main gate at Montford Point, the first thing I heard was, "You get off the bus."
So that was just a
beginning
sign of what was to come
that was the beginning.
Training was as tough as it can get. It was very, very tough.
Terrible. It was insane. Pretty brutal. You know, I've got spit on, kicked and punched and everything.
They was hazing several fellows in there out of who had was in training. And what I saw, I was ready to turn around like that.
We had these prefabricated huts, we call them. And when it rained outside, it rained inside. And at dusk dark, they would take us right by those swamps and make us stand at attention. And all you could do is twitch your nose, and mosquitoes would just sting you in your face and whatnot.
I think that if they use the same tactics today, half the drill instructors would be in jail.
Once you came in that gate, you forgot about your name because you were either boy or.
When these first recruits got there, they were highly encouraged to go unauthorized absence, or UA, or civilians pretty much know as AWOL, absent without official leave. They would say, nobody will come looking for you. All you gotta do is just take off in the night. Nobody's gonna look for you. We don't want you here. You're never gonna make it here. Just go away.
And the whole idea, from what I could understand at the time, was to frustrate you so much that you would either quit and go home or stay in. And so the meaner they got, the meaner I got. I wasn't about to quit.
Well, I could see, well, this is what they want you to do. They want you to fail. But knowing me, I'm dogmatic. I don't believe in giving up.
During boot camp, sometimes things got pretty tough. I said, well, Tuskegee Airmen made it, Buffalo Soldiers made it, and some of our slaves made it across that water. And I say, other than death, we're gonna make it.
Their prefabricated huts and facilities might as well have been a world away from the white Marines barracks, separated by the rule of segregation and railroad tracks. White and black Marines seldom saw one another.
You have to understand, when the first people came here, there were no NCOs, no corporals, no PFCs, no sergeants, no gunnery sergeants, master sergeants, and first sergeants who were black.
I thought the race relations, the separation of races was stupid, ridiculous, a waste of time and money, a waste of talent. But that's the way it was in those days, you know.
We went into town to go on Liberty, and it was a bus station. We would have to go in the back of the building in order to stand in line in order to buy a bus ticket. And as long as there were some people inside the building buying their tickets, they wouldn't serve us. They would only serve us if the people in the back. There was nobody in the front that was buying tickets, and they had a bathroom out there, and it said colored and white and all of that. Your drinking fountain said colored and white. I never encountered anything like that.
I have a kind of a problem with authority at that time. So I did things to just irritate people, like drinking out of the white water fountains and not wanting to sit in the back of the bus. And I've gotten thrown off a couple of buses and got in a fight with a sailor once here in Jacksonville and got arrested by the Jacksonville police. The staff sergeant that was in charge of us out at the rifle range told me, boy, he said, you better be careful. See, we're going to find you dead one of these days. Stop messing with these people.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
With the United States now fully fighting a war in Europe and the South Pacific, the decision came down for the Montford Point Marines to be deployed overseas.
And here comes this great big convertible limo, President Roosevelt. He says, men, now he didn't say boys, he says, men, you have broken records that the white Marines have had for years. As far as I'm concerned, you are just as good a Marine as any Marine that put on that uniform. Send them overseas.
While not initially sent for combat, thousands of Montford Pointers fought on the front lines of the Asia-Pacific theater, including some of World War II's bloodiest battles, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and Peleliu.
The guys on the fighting front out there didn't give a damn as long as you had your globe and anchor and that you came in with the things that they needed at that time. In fact, they called some of the black Marines black angels because in some of the fighting, they could not even stop the fighting to move their wounded. And so with the black guys coming up there with stretchers and what have you, food, medical and all that business, it meant a big difference.
That it is more important today than ever before to ensure that all Americans enjoy these rights. When I say all Americans, I mean all Americans.
By the late 40s, the push for Black American civil rights was growing stronger. President Harry Truman responded by appointing a commission on civil rights. Its recommendations included ending segregation in the armed services, and in 1948, Truman issued the executive order that ordered all military branches to integrate. Montford Pointers started to serve alongside their white counterparts. The men had proven their doubters wrong. They could be Marines. They did not disappear as military leaders had intended. But their historic feat, breaking the color barrier in the U.S. Marine Corps, was quietly dismissed.
I used to be offended when I would read about the Tuskegee Airmen and Buffalo Soldiers. I said, they're all recognized. I go into the movies and I'm seeing the heroics and things that happened at Iwo Jima. I don't see no black Marines. That used to bother me because I knew personally that there were a lot of Marines that served, started out at Montford Point, who are still overseas in the ground, buried, and they wasn't getting no recognition in these movies. And I said, I don't understand that. And that used to bother me.
It was not a part of Marine Corps taught history. As a Marine myself, coming through our training and our history, we were taught things about other Marines and other events, Iwo Jima, the Frozen Chosen, Chesty Puller, Dan Daly, all these men of great valor and everything, but when it came to the point of the Montford Point Marines, nothing. There was crickets.
In 1949, Camp Montford Point was decommissioned. It would be decades before a chorus of praise for the Montford Pointers began to grow. At the heart of it, the National Montford Point Marine Association.
But once I got in the Marine Corps, I was interested in the history. But during my first year in the Marine Corps, I worked for a African-American, a black master gunnery sergeant who happened to be a Montford Point Marine. I didn't know it at the time. When I got orders to Okinawa in February 1978, he gave me this book that I'm holding in my hand and asked me to read it. And it was like an enlightenment. I was like, wow, we do have a history. So when I got to Okinawa, Japan, I started teaching the history. So that was in February 1978. So I've been teaching the history about African Americans in the Marine Corps for 44 years.
Boot camp.
Yes.
And when you're learning about the history.
Yes.
You weren't learning about the Montford Point Marines.
Not at all, not 1 second. But when I came up in the ranks and was getting a little bit more stripes on my sleeves, I started questioning that. But the more I studied and became pretty much an expert on the history, I understood why it wouldn't happen. The Marine Corps didn't want you to know. It's just that simple. Pretty soon, the last Montford Point Marine would take their final breath. We got to honor these Montford Pointers while they're still living, and even if they're passed, we want to honor their families so their legacy lives on in perpetuity.
In 2007, Joseph Geter wrote the House bill that, if passed, would award a Congressional Gold Medal to the Montford Point Marines.
Joe and a bunch of other guys spent an inordinate amount of time running through the halls of Congress, getting congressmen and senators to support the Congressional Gold Medal being awarded to original Montford Point Marines.
I'm like, wow, this is painstakingly slow. And people were telling me normally these bills take 5 or 10 or 15 years. And I was getting a little excited. I said, my Marines don't have 5 or 10 or 15 years. They're dying every day.
But then, progress. The 35th Commandant of the Marines, James Amos, made a promise to push for Montford Pointers to be honored.
Now I had the full support of the Commandant and the lobbying team there. The Commandant arranged for a letter of support from President Barack Obama. For the first time, a Commandant of the Marine Corps was speaking out publicly about Montford Point, acknowledging that his predecessor, Thomas Holcomb, got it wrong.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today on this great day for the Montford Point Marines. Today, the House of Representatives will pass a resolution giving these Marines their long overdue recognition.
After 4 years, the bill passed, and on November 23, 2011, President Obama signed the law awarding the Congressional Gold Medal collectively to the Montford Point Marines. Some 70 years after changing the face of the United States Marine Corps, the first Black Marines were honored with the highest civilian award bestowed by the United States Congress. In June of 2012, about 400 original Montford Pointers traveled to the U.S. Capitol for a 2-day event in their honor. The first day, one original Montford Point Marine accepted the medal on behalf of the 20,000, those who were in the room and those who had passed on.
It does sadden me that so many of our brothers are not with us today. The upside of it all is that we do remember each and every one of them. They're in our hearts and minds, and they shall never be forgotten. This day, that gold medal, that Congressional Gold Medal, excuse me. This gold medal is very much theirs also. Wow, that was a big day, an exciting day. I felt so proud. Every Marine who was in the audience got all choked up, a lot of tears. Very emotional day to be, for the first time, recognized.
I did receive my Congressional Gold Medal, which I'm very proud of. I still have it. I attended the ceremony, and I was elated.
They had to in the course of history, recognize the black man, what his worth is in this country. It made me feel, the first time I really felt good.
The second day out at 8th and I Street, Marine Barracks, 8th and I Street, is where everybody, all the originals, they had a big parade and all that, and everybody got their medals individually, placed around their neck by 3-star generals, you know. And oh boy, you couldn't touch us after that, you know.
Since the 2012 ceremony, about 2,000 bronze replicas of the Congressional Gold Medal have been awarded to these heroes or their families. Now, the Montford Point Marine Association is working to find and give the medals to the remaining 18,000 men and their families. It's a way to honor them and the role they played in history, but it's also a way to build the roster of Montford Pointers that does not exist.
Hundreds of military records were lost due to a major fire. It was in St. Louis. So a lot of the Montford Pointers records were lost that way as well. But even before the fire, there was no indication that there was a complete record of all the Marines that trained in Montford Point. In fact, they didn't even start taking platoon pictures of the recruits that trained in Montford Point until well into their training, which was another indication that they really didn't expect them to be successful at it.
It's a part of American history. And for a long time, the guys who served the Marine Corps faithfully tried to tell everybody our story, but nobody was listening. Since then, we've gotten a Congressional Gold Medal. Since then, they've named a ship after us called the USNS Montford Point. Since then, we have the monument out here.
In 2022, a milestone, the 80th anniversary of the first Black Marines reporting to Camp Montford Point, a ceremony at their memorial commemorated the turning point in the U.S. military history.
I have to charge these young fellows on our behalf to keep the flag flying and to keep the name Montford Point out front.
The guests of honor, 5 original Montford Point Marines and 11 families of Montford Pointers, honored posthumously with their medals.
The Congressional Gold Medal for Sergeant Fred Moselle is his grandson, Maurice Smith.
Maurice. Honorary Sergeant, on behalf of the President of the United States, the Congress of the United States, it's my distinct pleasure.
Well, this is a real moment because back in 1943 when he joined, there was a lot of people who didn't want this color being a part of the Marine Corps. He didn't care. He overstepped that, went in, and decided this is what he was going to do for his family. And by him doing that, not only did he pave the way for his family, he paved the way for myself to be a Marine, because there's no way that I could have been a Marine today without Marines like him and the other Montford Point Marines that served. If I could say anything to my grandfather today, we did it. We did it.
It was very emotional for me.
Why emotional?
Well, I lost my father when I was 9. Suddenly, he passed unexpectedly. And so the fact that he wasn't here to be able to accept his award and that my mother was here after all these years, is a blessing to have her, even though I don't have him. What I see is the sacrifice of my father and other young Black men that accepted the challenge to join Marines during a time when it was segregated. They had the courage to step up to fight for their country at such a young age. And from what I've been told, he never really complained or talked about his experiences. He didn't really talk about it. And I've been told that a lot of the Marines didn't speak about their experiences during that time.
I don't know that a medal necessarily heals all those wounds, but it certainly recognizes them. I've seen pictures of them wearing their gold medal, and the look on their face says a lot. So maybe some of what was done and some of the sadness and disappointment that they may have experienced during the time that they served, maybe some of that was washed away when they received that medal. And I tell you, if my grandfather were alive now, he would be extremely proud to finally get recognition.
Their collective and individual accomplishments continue to inspire those who are still blazing trails in the Corps and beyond. Black Marines are reaching new heights, and just like the Montford Point Marines, they are paving the way for those who will follow. Just days before the Montford Point Marines' 80th anniversary, the United States Marine Corps promoted its first Black 4-star general, General Michael Langley.
I'm more than elated, every time I say. It's, I won't say, we can always say it's time, but I just had to live long enough to see this come to fruition.
I walked down the street one day and I saw a black lieutenant, and then I think about something a month later, I saw a black captain. I said, it was worth it, you know what I mean? I felt much better, you know what I mean? So it was really worth it.
And I'm so very happy to see the outcome of the Marine Corps itself today, to see the different race, creed, colors being serving in the United States Marine Corps, and happy about it as well.
Being a Marine, a man of color, that's what was a Marine, I stood on the shoulders of my grandfather. I stood on the shoulders of these men who came through and did some pretty amazing things, and to see the ones that are still here, it's like reaching back in history and knowing I came from that. I came from them, and it's utterly amazing.
Majority of Montford Pointers are in their 90s or older, and we know that there will come a point when there won't be any of them. But we still have to figure out how we keep the story alive.
One day, the story of the Montford Point Marines will include all of their names. Until then, the work continues. A mission to secure the legacy of the first Black Marines, honoring the men of Montford Point, one name, one story, one medal at a time.
If our grandfathers could succeed up against the things that they were presented with, the very least that we can do is help to find the additional 18,000 that are out there and their families.
It's always his bolo tie, always had a bolo tie, always had a pocket protector with a whole bunch of pens. He was always dressed, and always something Marines, always Marine hat, Marine shirt, something that always, told you that he was a Marine.
As a man, I think that he was the epitome of what it means to be a father, what it means to be a husband, and a provider. And I'm so grateful to have descended from my grandfather.
I'm sure he'd be proud. He'd probably say something like, it's about time.